Are we live?
Yes, we are streaming live.
We are streaming live. Wonderful. Okay, well, we're so glad that you are all here during this wonderful holiday season. Happy to be together as Finance Committee. And we're going to start right off with our staff introductions. And we have Jeff Conley, Fiscal Monitor, Financial Operations, and we have Carson Miller, Asset Management and Support Help Desk, Information Technology. So let's go ahead and start with Jeff. We'd love to hear an introduction.
Good morning. I don't usually get to see you all up close and personal, so that's really cool. Actually, I usually watch you on the screen. So really nice to meet you. My name is Jeff Conley. I work right next door here. I work in financial operations. We have a cool Shakespeare team. I'm a fiscal monitor. I've been assigned to the career and technical education program, and so my focus is working with Wendy Morton and the fiscal staff for CPE, and for all of the CPE programs, both federal and state. I work with Wendy and with Libby, the accountant up there, and try and go through and make sure all the LEAs are spending appropriately. They're meeting the fiscal program requirements for each of the individual CPE programs. And probably most importantly, trying to be a bit of a watchdog for any errors that might be coming that aren't big errors yet. I've developed a really good relationship with the LEA DAs and CPE directors, trying to stay in touch with them regularly to head off any problems that might be coming because they're out of this week. So I've been with I've been with USBE for about 4.5 years. And finally feel like I'm kind of settling into the job. There's a lot of stuff I had to learn with the different programs. But hey, I'm up to speed on.
There are a lot of CTE programs. We appreciate what you do and the support that you give to our schools so that you help provide these tracks that will help them to go far long term. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. All right, wonderful. Carson Miller.
Good morning. I've been with USBE for about 3.5 years. I do the asset tagging and help desk. So if you see a sticker on a laptop, it probably came through my hand or my team. And I probably helped you guys at least once or twice. We're the first response for incidents people may have, and then we choose to escalate it as needed. I really like helping people. I think that makes the job more so than just working on technology, which is also a great benefit. Always trying to learn, and you guys, if you need any help, we're happy to help.
Thank you so much, Carson. You just helped me yesterday. So we greatly appreciate your help and service. Thank you. I think we'll go ahead and do a quick introduction of board members. We've got 4 here. Member Booth, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'm Member Booth, Randy Booth with District 13, representing the Nebo and Provo school districts.
I am Cole Kelly. I represent District 12, and District 12 includes Forum, Vineyard, Linden, part of Pleasant Grove, Wasatch County, Duchesne County, Uinta County, and Daggett County. So, yeah.
Great.
Then my map yesterday was so awesome. Yeah, that was the coolest thing. Yeah. So,
that was so fun. I put mine all over my dining room table, and
yeah.
it was great.
Yeah, Matt Hymas, I represent District 10. This is the west side of Utah County, the west side of Salt Lake County, and all of Tooele County.
Great, thank you. And I'm Cindy Davis, and I represent District 11, the northern Utah County and the southern part of Salt Lake County. So parts of both of those, and I feel like I should be looking at a screen. This is interesting now, looking at real people, and I can't see. Do we have anyone online? And also, I'm wondering if people can hear us, and is there someone who can give us a thumbs up if our meeting is running and they can be,
Chair
we can be heard?
Davis,
Yes.
this is Tammy Gear.
Hi, Tammy.
Director of Achievement Support Services. We can hear you great.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. And I can see you when you speak, so that's great. Thank you. Okay, Cami, should we go ahead and start, or do you feel like? Okay. Oh, okay. We did not have any requests for public comment today, correct? So we're going to go straight into 2.2. Our action is to approve small school district capital projects for FY26. And we have School Finance Director Sam Urey here. Thanks, Director Urey.
Good morning, Sam Urey, School Finance Director. Let's see. While we get this, there we go. That one anyway.
Carson, you thought you were just coming to introduce yourself, and now we're putting you to work. So thank you. Build your work with one stone, absolutely. And thanks to those of you listening on YouTube who have texted in to say that the streaming is working. Thank you.
Okay, it's my privilege to present the Small School District Capital Projects Fund. This is actually now the fourth round of funding that we've had. If you recall back in 2022, HB 475 from Representative Glass created this program. The first 2 years, $50 million was appropriated in both 23 and 24. Then we had $30 million last year, and this year we had $12.5 million. So the amounts have come down a little bit. Those have been one-time funding amounts from the public ed stabilization account. But these are only for school districts and counties, classes 4, 5, and 6 that receive state guarantee funding. So the school districts that are in need of these funds, they have a hard time raising capital. They don't have a large tax base, and so it's been a really neat program for these rural districts, and they've been able to do many great projects. So we have, if we go down to this next slide here. So our board rule R277125 is our board rule that is associated with this one, and the panel members are actually called out in the legislation in statute. So that's the USBE superintendent, so Superintendent Hart, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, so Scott Jones, and then 2 additional USBE staff. So this has been myself and Dean Dykstra, our school construction specialist, and 2 governor's appointees with expertise in construction and financing. And those 2 folks this year were Andy Marr, who's the director of the Division of Facilities and Construction Management, and Matthew Boyer, who's an assistant director. Both have many years of expertise, and we really appreciate them joining us and helping us in this process. So the in code, it asks us to emphasize life safety, efficiency of use, program growth, and capacity, as well as kind of those funding elements to to rate these projects and decide which ones to fund. We would love to fund all of the projects. I just want to say that, but with limited funds, we do the best we can. So just a quick review in this next slide. This was the first year, fiscal year 2023. There were $142 million of total state requests. We had the $50 million, and so Wayne High School, San Juan, Henry, and Juab all got projects in that first year. Going down to the next slide to 24. In that year, High Henry, North Stampede, Carbon, San Juan, and Logan all got projects. The total request for that year was $162 million. If we go to the next year, 25, we had $30 million available and gave projects to Carbon, Duchesne, Emory, South Sanpete, Pintic, and Wayne, and had total requests of $145 million. So finally this year, the request that does require board approval, Board Rule R277125 requires board approval for any project over $2 million in this specific program. So we're recommending that we fund a Garfield School District project to basically, the title of the project is Cambridge Middle School Replacement, but they've basically been in modulars for a long time, and this allows them to really have a complete school. You know, we loved all of these other projects as well and rated them highly, but with just the limited funding available, we do recommend giving the entire $12.5 million available this year to that Garfield project. It's really a project that can't happen without these funds. They have maxed out their, you know, their taxpayers are giving a lot of effort. They've recently done projects with their general obligation bonds and capital local levy to make some things happen with some elementary schools in their district. But for this project is really one that can't happen without these funds, and so we do recommend this particular project. The complete application is there in backup if you'd like to look at it. But that is my presentation on this program. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Member Kelly, or Vice Chair Kelly, I should say.
I'm just looking at the recommended action real quick before I formulate my question, but so as this action, this recommended action, are we then approving the Garfield County amount? That's what we would be doing is approving that $12.5 million to Garfield County. Exactly. Okay.
Member Booth.
I was interested in just seeing the range of projects and the trend as indicated by Ricky Uri has been that there's always a lot more being requested than we can possibly accommodate. I'm wondering if we need to, I recognize that in many of these locations across the state, their hands are tied. They really are just at the mercy of whatever. You know, they are just not in a strong position. I'm wondering if we need to conduct some kind of a study looking at long range, particularly when safety is an issue with a building, with a district that has maxed out what they can do locally without an additional help. Determining if this needs to be bumped up, what we would be recommending is a policy for the board that some of these requests need to be bumped up and get greater attention, perhaps through some other program or through our priorities that we're taking to the legislature. These, I don't know how desperate they are in some of these locations, but I would imagine that some of these requests were the ones that we denied last year and the year before, or we had $140 million requested and we had 50 million, we had 30 million. So, and just having this much information is piquing my interest in what additional information should we be seeking and should we be reviewing in order to be supported as much as we can. I know limited resources, but this might, in some specific instances, might be a safety issue that we need to help solve. So this is something I would do under a certain thoughts on that.
Well, you know, I've thought similar things in the past, and I do think we are making some improvements. I do know that a couple of years ago or a few years ago, we helped to initiate, and I think we helped pay for a West Ed study for our needs in our rural schools. And that has now resulted in an increase of funding for our schools in our rural areas, which I think over time is going to help with some of this. Although this is capital monies here that they're asking specifically. And then also last year, something else came that's new, and that's the facilities monies now that they can apply. So for example, 2 of those in Duchesne, they had applied for this one prior to that one being available. So they ended up just leaving it on this, but there would be a couple of opportunities where those needs might be able to be met. And I do know on those grants, safety is a key consideration when they're looking at giving those grants. But we certainly always can have the ability to look at it. So if there's a real extreme safety need or something, and we want to use our discretionary funds or something of that nature, that would be certainly something to think about, you know, and you mentioned, you know, how long do these go without being filled and become issues of high concern?
May I have a follow-up?
Please.
So when this program was initiated in 22, 50 million was available. The next year, 50 million, then 30, then half. So next year it should be 6, and then 3. And, you know, so I know that the needs are not diminishing, but the funds are diminishing. And as we look at the big picture of funding, and our requirements and our priorities, it boggles my mind that Deborah and Scott and the team can even figure out how to just make everything work. Having sat through a lot of meetings with USBE and a lot of other issues that have to do with finance. But this, you know, it was deemed necessary at a $15 million level in 22. Now, but I'm just afraid that I don't know, are we doing something wrong in terms of not being the cheerleader from the side or speaking about what successes and how effective the use of these funds have been, and so that people recognize, wow, we did a good thing in 22, and there's still making good things happen. The severely reduced funds, maybe we ought to take a look at this based on the apparent needs. Is this a priority, Chair or Chair? You know, is this something we should be worrying about more than we are worried? Or does it just let it go and let it fit in how it really fits in?
Should I have that you're making me think of is was this initiated to try to help with some heavy lifts and phase out eventually once they got some of those heavy lifts done? Is that why we're seeing the consistent reductions? Because I know like Wayne High School is a heavy lift and we've helped with some of those things.
You know, the history is it was explained to me was some of these districts that were funded in those first couple of rounds, Wayne School District specifically, like Paiute and San Juan, those were some of the districts that maybe had the most difficulty raising capital funds. I don't want to say that it's easy for any of these districts because it's not. You know, I'll say the governor's budget actually asks for another 50 million this year. You know, I certainly would say that the needs are still out there. I would say that potentially, you know, the projects that are left are more projects where the districts, though they'd have a lot of difficulty, could at some level access some sort of capital funding, whether that's at least revenue bond, whether that's going to the village for a general obligation bond, you know, things of that nature. It's one of the things too that's happened is we've seen a lot of the one-time money go to school safety upgrades, and so you know, in some cases, some of these districts have gotten some of the school safety grants as well. They're not necessarily just focused on capital, but they are capital expenditures for those school safety upgrades. So, you know, I know the legislature has a lot of competing priorities. When it first was introduced, I didn't necessarily hear of any plans to phase it out, but it's always been a one-time appropriation. So it's been, you know, a program that districts have definitely taken advantage of. I think they would continue to benefit from it as funds are appropriated, but that's really, you know, kind of up to the board on how much you want to emphasize this particular program compared to others like school safety and things of that nature. Yeah, I do think we see this year, the 26th, you know, total request of 45.6 million for state funding. I do think if we had had something more like the 30 or 50 million, we would have seen more applications, right? I think some of these districts were being pretty realistic, realizing that only 12.5 million was available. I say only. I don't want to downplay the importance of that 12.5, but where fewer funds were available, I think we saw fewer applications this year, but if that's helpful context.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Kelly.
This may be on that chart and I'm just not seeing it, but I'm curious, Garfield County, that 12.5 million, I'm assuming that that's not going to cover the entire project. What percentage of it?
If we can just zoom in, it was on that top line there.
Okay.
So the way this grant works is depending on your capital local levy rate that you're levying to your taxpayers is how much match you can qualify for. But I believe Garfield with their capital local levy actually qualifies for an 80% match. So if there were more funds available, they would qualify for more funds. Okay. But as it is, their total project is 24.2,
about half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious, I know, and this is maybe more for, well, it's for me and the public, I think, but I know that a lot of like our lands in Utah are federal lands and makes it difficult for areas like Garfield County. Do we know Garfield County specifically, how much of their area is tied up in federal lands?
So I do want to remind you that there is the federal impact aid program for school districts with large portions of federal lands. They do receive some federal dollars to kind of replace those local property taxes. Off the top of my head, I don't know specifically how much Garfield receives in that. I know San Juan County receives a lot of those. I I get the emails every time they send payments out, but I can't recall off the top of my head. But so that is one of the things that the federal government does to kind of replace the local property taxes. But yeah, it is difficult, I think, for all these rural districts to manage some of those things with lower, even if they have lower, um, federally owned lands, they still have, reduced values compared to some of the urban districts and things of that nature. So.
Thank you so much, Chair Hermes.
Yeah, if there is, I don't see any other lights. I'm happy to put a motion for.
Great, thank you.
I move that the committee approve the FY26 small school district capital projects as recommended by the review panel and forward the recommendation to the board for approval.
Thank you. Not gonna be, yeah, well, thank you for being willing, though. Yeah, thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves the FY26 small school district capital projects as recommended by the review panel and forward the recommendation to the board for approval. See no other lights. Members, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes with unanimously with member Bogus absent, and she's asked to be excused for this first part of the meeting, and appreciate that, and we'll see her shortly, I believe. And I'll just note, whenever we have these conversations about these needs in our rural areas, I try to once a year drive to one of our rural areas and look at our schools and just be in the space. And I try to once a year go to our very most urban areas and be in the space because I live in a suburban area. And I know that even though we represent our individual districts, we really are making decisions that impact kids in a lot of different situations throughout the state. So we're always aware of that and appreciate the opportunity to have these discussions. Member Bogus, welcome. So glad you're able to join us. We are on to agenda 2.3, statewide online education program amendment. And we have Staff Leads Director of Law and Professional Practices, Ben Rasmussen. And today, to talk about this specifically, we have Director of Achievement Support Services, Tammy Gear. Director Gear, would you like to give us a little intro?
I would. Thank you. I am over the statewide online education program of the SOAP, and we did bring this back 2 months ago. Anyway, you voted on it to revamp it. I wanted to let you know we did realize some things had gotten removed, so we're making a few little changes. But I did want to let you know that we will be working during legislative session and presenting this. This is one of the longest rules I believe you have. And one of our missions in the SOAP team is four things. We want all of our communication to be clear, concise, correct, and consistent. And in trying to achieve that, we've revamped our online provider manual. We got it from 137 pages down to 26 pages, I believe. And we will be doing that with this rule, just making sure that it is clear and consistent and there's not things in it. But that brings us to where we are and why we're back here again today. If you could go to line 790. So when we edited the rule and brought it before you we changed this appropriations to just small schools, and it used to be for it was labeled limited appropriations for special populations because it included homeschool students, private school students, and small school students. Private schools have been are going out to an outside entity to take care of those. And so we changed this for small schools, but we do still have the oversight for homeschool and the need to fund that. And so we've changed the 790 just to say small schools. And then if you'll go to 835. And we are just re-adding, oh, the other thing is when we were looking at our tiers, we felt that we should add the tiers on small schools are based on county class, and we have added third class into tier 3. And then on line 864, we've re-added these words back, and they were just taken out accidentally, but we do need that the appropriation for homeschool students. So that is what we are proposing for this change. And then Chair Davis, I believe you had a change you wanted to make. Do you want me to talk about that, or do you want to introduce that?
I have an amendment, but I think we need to get a motion on the floor before I make an amendment. So would someone be willing to put a motion on the floor? Thanks, Member Booth.
I would move that the committee approves R277726, statewide online education, right?
Yes.
Statewide online education program draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-726 statewide online education program draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. We'll open for discussion, and I have an amendment. Seeing no other lights at this time, I'll go ahead and make that. I would like to amend line 211 to strike the word ensuring and replace it with consider, and then to strike the words is included. And I had a little bit of a concern with some of the other lines, but I feel like there are some words in there that add a bit of flexibility, because the responsibility legally of the LEA is to consider the entire education landscape of the child and then gather input where needed and then invite the teachers that are needed to come, whether those are online or whether those are brick and mortar. And I felt like the language in 211 with the ensuring is included for a revision didn't necessarily mean that person had to come to an IEP, but it meant that every single online teacher would have to be asked to contribute to the revision. Whereas, for example, my son takes an online PE course, and if he had an IEP, that teacher would have to be asked for the input, whereas the PE teacher in the brick and mortar school wouldn't even be asked for the input if it was like a math IEP. So I wanted to just add a bit of flexibility that mirrored what's required in the law. And so the law is for consideration, and I visited with Deputy Voorhees and Director Gear about this, and you can speak to this too if you want to, or need to, Director Gear, but that was my reasoning for making those little word changes.
And I fully support that. It's we need to make sure that they are consulted and that they're what knowledge they have is included in any revisions. And so I agree with that. We need them to be a participant, but like you say, if they don't have the relevant information, then it's a moot point. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Gear. Member Bogus. Okay.
About the English doesn't seem to get close to me. If you strike the word include, it would be considering the authorized government course provided is in the. So it would put the.
Yeah, it's not e. There's no e. So it would say. So it would read consider. I'm going to go back to the line. Okay, so it would read. Consider the authorized online course provider in an eligible student's IEP revisions.
So it's semantics at this point.
Yes. Was deleted.
I don't think it's in the.
Yeah.
Clearly understand.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, but yes, and that E would have messed up the rest of it too. So
Okay.
yeah. Thank you. Any other? I don't see any other lights on. So members, please vote. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Director Gear. We appreciate your help today.
Happy to help. Thank you.
Oh, that was just the amendment. Now we need to go back to the main motion. Thank you. Thank you, Cammie Wilcox, for keeping us in line. So now we'll go back to the main action, which is, oh, actually you had a comment first, but we'll go back to the main motion. So I think it would be appropriate time for your question.
See the definition. How would you define homeschool students? Because it seems to be not as the content. So we can include some.
Director Gear,
If that was a question for me, I couldn't hear the question. I apologize.
pull the mic close to your mouth. Thank you.
But you should understand.
Sorry,
Now that we
folks
have fixed
online,
all
we're
of my
having
problems
technical
this morning,
difficulties.
Director Garrett, I'm wondering how you're defining homeschool student, because I don't see a definition in here. And the way that language is used appears to be out of alignment with our legislative code.
So, so that's am I okay to answer, Chair?
Yes, please.
So we are working on that right now. Homeschool students are supposed to be based on the statute, those who do not have any enrollment in an LEA. We are looking into a few incidences right now where the student is homeschooled, but maybe they're taking some classes from the LEA. And so we have these funds that we pay for the courses for homeschool students. But we are trying to ensure right now that those homeschool students are strictly homeschool students and not part-time at an LEA. But it should just be, we should only be paying for courses that are homeschool students that do not have an affiliation with an LEA. Did that answer your question?
That's how the funding's calculated. But I will say that there's going to be a big revamp of this whole rule directly following legislative session, because we've had recent changes, and then we'll probably get more changes coming up this session, because they just split the home and private schools from SOEP.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We still,
All right.
Chair Davis, we do still have the homeschools. We don't have private schools anymore.
Correct.
Okay.
So we will need, I think before this goes through the board, even we probably need a definition, and we can work on that over the next month, but I think we need to define that better, because as this reads, it doesn't read correctly with our code lines.
So is that a motion to ask for staff to draft a definition
Yes.
that works within the provisions of the current code within the SOEP scope?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And let's put it in a draft for the board. We can get this moving, but
Okay.
I think that needs to be defined so that we know what we're
To
talking
be brought to, and then if you,
I can put
we're
another
comfortable with the, language, then you would make the amendment in full board meeting. Yeah. All right, so there's a motion. Do we need a motion if we're directing staff? We do need to vote on that, don't we?
I think we have to vote
To
on it.
direct staff to draft a definition of homeschool within the context of code and SOEP.
Even if we just link the code lines. And possibly Director Gear, I think that would precipitate changing some of the language throughout the rule. Because we've got some places in here where, as it reads now, the code wouldn't allow for those things to happen. So I just think we need to look at it further.
Okay.
And I can make those amendments.
So we'll put it through for today and then look at that definition and see if it impacts any other lines of the rule.
I think that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, see no other lights. We have a motion on the floor to direct staff to draft a definition of homeschool within the definition of code and SOEP. Those in favor say aye. Yes, be semantic. Homeschool student. No, it's just fine. Yeah, it's just fine. So we have a motion on the board to direct staff to draft a definition of homeschool student within the definition of code and SOEP. Member Gear, Director Gear, did you have any thing to add to that? Is that something?
Yeah, I don't have time right now to look, but I'm pretty sure homeschool student is defined in the statute, in the code. So, I will do some research on that. And, how would you like me to inform you of that? Do you want me to just email you what I find? I will work with Ben Rasmussen on defining that if it's not already.
Yes, I think once you draft it, you could email it to the members of the committee, but I think Member Bogus will take a specifically close look at that and kind of look through. That would be really helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
You weren't voting yet, right? Did you have a comment? I see the wheels turning in Chair. Hi, Mrs. Nice. We'll keep going. All right. There's a motion on the floor to direct staff to draft a definition of homeschool student within the definition of code and SOEP. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we're going to go back to the main motion, which is that the committee approves R277-726 statewide online education program draft 1 on first reading as amended, draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Seeing no lights, those in favor say aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Speaking of rural schools, we are now on to our rural school sports facilities program report. Director Yuri.
I do want to say that maybe take a moment of personal privilege. I feel really grateful to, be able to work with these schools and these programs. It's one of the best parts of my job, and really appreciate those rural superintendents and business administrators and principals and everyone that's applied for this program. We got about 25 applications this first round, and we had 4.39 million appropriated. So if we can actually go to that 2 backups down to the Carbon School District. This is a project we did recommend funding, but I just want to use it as an example of some of these projects that were proposed. All of these projects it was so hard to narrow them down. We wanted to fund them all again, but just lots of needs out there. We do hope the legislature appropriates some more funds for this program we had about 10.7 million in requests with the 4.39 available. So the governor did put another 5 million in his budget for this program next year. And it does actually, so Representative Oxier's bill last year, HB 462, was the one that created this program. We did actually, as part of the Common Data Committee process, provide some information to the legislative fiscal analysts about how many applications we'd received, so that they are aware of the needs going into the 2026 session. But if we can scroll down here, so that legislation asked USBE to create an application and a rubric and be able to distribute these funds. Really, I just want to show some of these pictures of this project that were, right there's one of them. It's maybe a little bit hard to see, but this gym at Mont Carmel High School in Carbon is not in great shape. The floor is buckling. They've got divots, and if you go down, they've got blue tape everywhere, just covering big, huge boards that create lips and tripping hazards on the court. Keep going down. Just not level at all. Blue tape everywhere. Keep going. They actually have water that's groundwater that's been leaking into this gym. If you keep going, there's some of the mitigation efforts that they've started, but this project will allow them to completely mitigate that groundwater issue and refinish the gym floor so that it's usable, safe, and provides the community benefits as well as the school benefits for their physical education program. So just an example, again, there were 25 applications, very similar to this, cracks, cracking, and it's to go along with Member Booth's comments. There's so many needs out there that we would love at some point to have a facilities condition assessment done for all schools across the state. There are some districts that have been able to do those sorts of things, but there are lots of needs out there. So if we can go back to the presentation. Okay. So as the legislation was passed, we amended R 277125 to include the rural school athletic grants, and basically just outlined the way the application should look, and the way that it would be reviewed. If we can go down, in this case, the board rule does not require actually a board approval. It puts the responsibility on staff to make those determinations of how these funds will be distributed. But I will say we actually recruited the same panel, the Small School District Capital Projects panel, to also look at these projects. So we still have that expertise from the Division of Facilities and Construction Management. And I have reached out to Terry Davis, our physical education specialist here at USBE, who has volunteered to participate next year. Hoping that we do have more funds appropriated next year. So these are the projects that we recommended funding. And the total is the $4.39 million. And so we have a high school softball project, that Mont Harmon Middle School gym project that we just looked at, Gunnison High and Manti High in South Sanpete, North Sanpete High School, Tintic High School, their gymnasium, Green River High School in Emory, Richfield High School in Sevier County. And just one note that San Juan High School San Juan School District applied for the tracks at all of their high schools. And I did put White Horse High there, but it's going to be for San Juan High School, their first project there. So that totaled the $4.39 million. go down to the next slide. These are all of the projects that we also would have loved to be able to fund, but the needs outweighed the funds available. So total project costs to 22.8 million. The limit in the statute is 500,000 per school. And so that's the total request were 10.7 million on the state funding side. So again, would have loved to have funded all of these projects and hope to be able to fund more as we receive more funds. And with that, I report out on that program. Any questions?
Seeing no lights, thank you so much, Director Yuri. We really appreciate this. And thanks to Representative Oxier, she's out there for really seeing a need and taking some action there. So I want to give a shout out there as well. Let's go to in 2.5, our School Children's Trust Quarterly Report, Director Paula Plant. You may be with us online.
I am, thank you. And Tammy, you will help me with the slides, please. Okay, so our quarterly report, we're first wanted to let you know about any legislation dealing with the program or the trust generally. And there are 3 bills that I'm aware of at this point in time. 2 of them came through the Land Trust Protection, with the Trust Lands Advisory Committee that advises you. School Community Council amendments is one that is intending to simplify and clarify some of the requirements that are in the code. Relating to councils, most of them are just completely outdated and just need to be eliminated. The second one, the public school attendance amendments, it's not, that is, the second piece got put into that bill because that the Charter Trust Land Council section of code was open in that bill. And all this does is allows a Charter Trust Land Council in their first year of operations to use their board instead of seating a council. And the reason for that is that in a first year of operation, with everything a charter needs to do, a charter school needs to do, putting together election procedures, trying to hold an election, and then prepare a plan was making it so that the schools were not receiving their money until in the spring, which is not really helpful to the students. So that's what that bill does. This last one, I think, is going to be discussed a little bit this afternoon. But just as a reminder, I've tried to keep you updated about this bill over the past year. It is a result of a legislative audit that came out a year ago, well, over a year ago. And a working group was assembled that was chaired by Senator Darren Owens and Representative Burton, that included all of the entities that have involvement with the advocacy office. And so this bill is in response to that audit, is answering the questions in the audit. It has been in this past month in November, it went to the Natural Resources Interim Committee, which is the same committee where the audit needed to be reported out. And they made it a committee bill and voted it unanimously to go directly to the floor. It also now has the support of the Joint Legislative Council, which is a school boards association, and the superintendents, and also has official support from the Utah PTA. So the sponsor is hoping for a position of support from the state board, but of course that's a decision that you'll be making one way or the other later today. I think it is important to point out that this has a lot to do with the public school trust, which is the school and trust program. The State Board of Education has responsibility also for the schools for the deaf and the schools for the blind, which each have their own trust. And this bill addresses transparency and accountability both for those trusts as well. If you'll go to the next slide, please, Kemi.
Director Plant,
Oh, yeah.
before we go to the next slide, can we just stop on that one for Chair Reynolds for a minute?
Yeah, thank you. I just have a question on the land trust protection and advocacy amendments. Do we have a member of the board serving on that?
There is not a member of the board serving on it. The decision was to have the chair of the getting these terms mixed up, of the Trust Lands Advisory Committee that advises you, is who was appointed to sit on that working group. So Kay Douglas, who is the vice chair of that advisory committee that advises you, is the person that sat on the committee representing the Public School Trust.
Thank you.
It would be nice to have a board member on that committee as well. But I am remembering now, I think that you had told us that once before. Thank you. And Kate is fabulous. He would be a great voice. Thank you so much. We can continue on your presentation.
Okay, so then the next thing I wanted to report to you is the distribution that has gone out to the schools. We just have 3 schools that still are unfunded. 2 of them are charter schools. And we hope that the legislation that I just spoke to you about might correct that problem in future years for charter schools. One of them is a new school in Alpine School District. And they just haven't quite completed the requirements yet. So we hope that distribution will go out this month. And then the next slide. If you'll go back, sorry, Kemi. So I did want to let you know that we do know now the distribution that will go out in 27. And you can see the increase in the student average, so that you can see the difference between 2 years. This 27 is the year that Amendment B that we spoke to you about, that was on the ballot a year ago, that passed and allowed for an increased distribution of above 4%, but not to exceed 5%. So this is a 1-year bump. And the schools will receive this additional money in the plans that they will be preparing when they come back from the winter break. Thank you.
Director Plant?
Yes.
Just a quick question on that slide. Did you say the 3 new schools that are unfunded, did you say were in Alpine School District, or these are the 3 new school districts to get funding moving forward?
No. Oh, no. I'm sorry. I will clarify that. It's 1 new school in Alpine now. So it just opened this year in Alpine School District. The other 2 are charter schools.
Got it. And the charter schools are new also. That's why all 3 are.
Yes. Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, they're all new. Okay, so then the next thing I wanted to update you on is a compliance update. We do conduct a compliance review of the requirements for fall reporting. These are the things that are required in the fall. The councils have to assemble a council. They report who's on the council, both on their website and on the School Land Trust website. And then they sign an assurance form that they were seated according to the law. Charter schools need to have election procedures in schools where elections occur. They can elect a counselor, they can use a board if the board conforms with the 2 parent majority requirement, and then rules of order and procedure for school districts. We noticed them under your rule dealing with compliance. They were noticed in the spring and again in August of this review. They were provided training and templates to assist them in making sure that those rules of order and procedure and election procedures were consistent with the law. And then we review 10% or 3 schools in each LEA and then we get back to the LEA and say, this is what we found. Please get your schools in compliance if they're not. And then they have a responsibility to reply back that they have taken that step. And then if you go to the next slide, we have another compliance responsibility. I think it's perhaps important for you to know that probably for about 8 years now, we have been trying to make sure that the schools are spending the money on the current year students. And we've had a bit of a difficulty with large carryovers. We started a process to try and make sure that schools were in compliance, and then COVID came. And of course, during COVID, many of the plans that had been submitted, actually for a couple of years, they had difficulty being able to be compliant. They were having difficulty hiring people. They were having difficulty receiving requested equipment like computers for a while. We were having difficulty receiving them. So they had a few years to try to get back in compliance after the COVID challenge. And this is the first year that we will enforce the carryover responsibility. So for you to be aware, again, this was we followed the procedure for compliance that's in your rule. The schools were noticed a year ago in January, which is when we have expenditure numbers that have been reported through the UPEF system. And we know then how much their carryover is. And we noticed every district about the schools in their district that were non-compliant. Provided a short training. It was less than 5 minutes for them to understand why carryover is a problem and how they could rectify it. Obviously, they could spend money in last year. They could also, for their plans for this year, spend the money so that they would be compliant by this time this year. So they had a year to get that right. There were a few exceptions, which we reviewed, and a couple of exceptions were granted. And then we will have that UPES entry from 25. And this year, and this was a recommendation actually from the LEAs, that if a school that was non-compliant a year ago is still non-compliant, the carryover amount will be redistributed within the LEA to schools that were compliant. So we haven't done this before. We are hoping that very few schools are going to lose any money. But that is the procedure, and that's what we'll be following. And
you're saying LEAs requested that?
Yes. Yes. So then, so that takes care of compliance. The next piece that is our responsibility, in addition to administering the program and conducting compliance, of course, is training so that people understand on the front end what their expectations are. So we conducted online trainings that were open to anybody who wanted to participate. Training is actually the responsibility of the local LEA. We provide support services and do provide additional trainings to support especially smaller school districts. We did 4 for councils and 4 for charter councils, and that will show you how many people participated in those trainings. Also this year, we recognize that for brand new principals, understanding the program and their responsibilities can sometimes be a challenge. So a Canvas course was put together by Marcus on our team, and this is how many new principals took that course. So we hope that that will provide support to them over this first year. And then, in addition to that, these are additional on-site trainings that have been requested by the district. So the district knows it's their responsibility, or the charter school, to do the training. They may request that we come and do the training for them. And so these are additional trainings that have been or will be provided. In addition to, the next slide indicates summer and winter trainings, right, for organizations. So we provide training through organizations as well, and we'll provide a couple of trainings at the USBA Winter Conference. And that concludes my report. If there are any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Director Plant, thank you. I don't see any lights, but we will thank you for the good work that you do, and always appreciate you coming and helping us stay in the know. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move to 2.5 minimum school program. Mid-year updates with, looks like minimum school program administrator Dale Frost and Director Yuri.
Well, Director or MSP Administrator Del Frost gets hooked up here. I just want to acknowledge the lift that this is to get October 1 data and basically recalculate billions of dollars in a very short time span, very accurately, is a credit to not only Dale, but also MSP analyst Winona Moss, and also want to give a lot of credit to the MSPA system and team, the developers there, and Katrina Cole, that do a great job in helping us kind of double check those calculations. But these two burned the midnight oil, if you will, to get these calculations out to the field as quickly and accurately as possible. And so just did a great job doing that. So I'm over here to Dale.
Thank you, Director Yuri. Chair Davis, Dale Frost, MSP Administrator, can I just dive in? That work? Okay.
Please do.
I know this is not, I just wanted to let you know, you, especially because we do have a little more time. I do have some additional data. You saw the enrollment projections, we talked about that, but the Gardner Institute came out with long-term projections and revisions, and we did some additional analysis for BAs. We can show that to you if you want, or just dive into mid-year updates, because they do relate.
Vice Chair Kelly has asked that we look at those enrollment comparisons first and then dive in.
So because they haven't been noticed, we can always put this in as an information item next month, so it's there. This was a presentation we made to the superintendents. The request was made after we presented to you. because the district superintendents, if you remember, are almost uniformly dealing with drops in enrollments. And so kind of what's the statewide context? Yeah, so less than a month ago, the Gardner Policy Institute came out with their revised long-term projections. I do want to emphasize, we don't know what's going to happen next year, let alone in 2065. But their demographers do a lot of good work, and superintendents have to plan out well in advance, especially if we have to build schools and those sort of things. We want them to use taxpayer funds as efficiently as possible with the given uncertainties. So we wanted to show them, because there were significant changes from the previous version. So the previous version was from 2020 to 2065. So what I wanted to show to compare here is you're like, well, what does that mean? These were the projections 5 years ago for the same students. So this is not just public ed students. These are all students, the projected population from ages 5 to 17. So public ed K-12 age. So at the peak, in the old projections, and those are projections from essentially 5 years ago. They did do some updates, but I'm just going to call them the old projections. They projected that the peak that was going to happen was going to occur in 2023, and then the trough would occur in 2035 for a drop of 51,000 students or kids. And then, because of how the generations work, there would be an increase. And that trend is going to continue. It's just how, if you kind of think about generations, so like the baby boomers and those who came after them was a smaller population, but the kids of the baby boomers was a larger population, the Gen X, that kind of, So there are ebbs and flows, and then two generations here. So they originally projected that from that trough to peak, which would happen in 2054, would add an additional 159,000 students, for a net change of 108,000 students from essentially peak to peak. Does that make sense? The other way to say it would be that they projected that we would go from 725,000 students to 825 plus, or let 717 between 25,000 students. That was the original projections. Is that helping to? Correct. Yes. And historically, the percentage has been about 95% within the public school education system. That has gone down. It's now more like 91%. So still the vast majority of kids are in the public system, but 4% of that is sizable. You say 91%, and you say public. It includes charters and school districts. So in the case, so if you have, let's just keep the number, like round numbers, right? If you have a population of 700,000 and 90% are in charter schools and or districts, that means 10% are not. So 700,000 minus 70,630 would be the public ed population. Does that help, Vice Chair Kelly?
Director Foss, every time I see this and I hear the economists say, for over the next 10 years, we're going to decline, and then we're going to increase exponentially. But I never hear what the mitigating factors are. What's the causation? Is it land development? I mean, why are we losing for 10 and then gaining for the next 20 so rapidly?
So Vice Chair or Chair Davis, I told the superintendent, I like to sometimes put on different roles. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant, though my brother-in-law thinks I am. And I'm not a demographer. But I like playing that. So let me give that caveat. So I do know some of this is just the differences in sizes of generations. You know, so if you have a large generation who's now of childbearing years, then that will be larger. But there's a whole lot of other things. There's the cost of living. There's, net migration. There's, the cost, and certainly the distribution of this will change dramatically. But beyond that, I would recommend, and it might be well worth it, to bring the folks, the actual demographers who know what's causing this. Because the superintendent's asked me the same question, what's driving this? And it's, I can guess, but I don't want to give a false impression. I don't know, what's pushing and why, and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I have heard, what's her name? Is it Natalie? Who's our key economist there? She's fascinating. She'd be great for a study session sometime.
State, for anyone that's the word.
It's okay. I just, we'll think of it and give a shout out. Let's go ahead to the presentation.
Yeah, and I do want to give a shout out that these are not my data points. These are from, and again, these are projections. These are definitely not actual. And that goes to the revision. What a difference 5 years makes. A pandemic, inflation, all those kind of things. So these are now the revised projections. So again, the red line was what was kind of projected pre-pandemic or very soon post-pandemic, right? These are now the revised projections. I do want to caveat, you see why there's a star there. They don't all line up. So I had to make some adjustments. So you're not asking like, why did we lose 20,000 kids in 1 year? So from, 2024, those are essentially my numbers to smooth between the two data sets. But after that, it's their data. Essentially, and this will make sense. We capped out in 2021 instead of 2023, and they're projecting now a drop of 2036, where before it was 2035. Okay, and then the drop, rather than being 50,000, is 95,000.
Sure, Highness.
Yeah. Dale, thank you. It kind of goes along with Chair Davis's question. Like, how do we know that our 15 to 25-year-olds are just not going to have kids? Is that what it's the internet?
So the Gardner policy, I don't know. A joking answer would be that they haven't told anyone. They have the time machine and they go and survey. I mean, you don't go and bet on the Super Bowl because we're geeks. You go and survey and then you come back with the time machine. I mean, that's the challenge, and it may be that the birth rate has dropped faster than what was projected, which might be, I would guess that's one of the main drivers of this, but again, that's why I would talk to them and get the specifics of what's really causing this, because we have a hard time projecting for next year. I'm really glad I'm not trying to do these 40-year projections.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just interesting to me in both projections, and I'm a projection believer as anyway. So I am. I love statistics and data.
But it's all about the assumptions. Am I
it
right?
really is. But in both projections, we're seeing a decline.
Right.
It's like, well, how do we have this steady incline over the past? I don't know how many. The graph only shows it 2010, but it's been growing in Utah for quite some years, right? And then now all of a sudden, it's like, well, we're predicting a $50,000 deficit of people.
Student age.
Of student age, and we're not talking about, we're talking more birth rate than we are move-ins or move-outs, right? And then now we're saying realistically, it's almost double. It's at 95,000. It's like, well, how do you even? You just put it in Excel and say, hey, Excel, show me that. That's how I do my projections,
What
right?
was that revision to double?
Yeah.
I mean, the revision essentially doubled it. So what changed between the first and the second?
Correct. And that's why I would, if you want to drill down in these numbers, and I think it's well worth it, because we're talking about what's the future of our system for the next 30 years. It's what are the assumptions in there? How do the demographers do their work on this? I'm just presenting the data. I don't know.
Because it goes on a projection, it goes half the gain, right, and double the loss.
Yep.
It's just fascinating. Yep. That's all. Anyway, I wanted to.
When I saw these numbers, if I may, Chair, and
Yes.
if you want me to just speed up, I know I don't know if there are additional presentations. It didn't look like there were.
We do not. That's your one.
Okay, so if you can kind of tell me the mid-year updates is like a half an hour presentation. So if you need us done before 11, then I can hurry.
Let's, oh no, we're scheduled until 12, but we do want to economize time.
Sure.
So, but we want you to take the time you need to communicate well also.
Did you have something for you?
As far as a lot of these assumptions go, if you have time to read the Gardner Policies Institute's report, it's only 8 pages, and it goes through. It doesn't have all of the underlying assumptions, but it does demonstrate. They're still projecting that Utah's birth rates or fertility rates are higher than state average, but they decline than the national average. Sorry, but they still are declining, and that follows trends across the nation and in the westernized world. But
Can I show? I can jump in forward a little bit, but this kind of gets to that.
yeah.
So I did want to show longer periods of time to kind of get to this. So this shows from 1975 and every 5-year period through the 2065. That the proportion, so the blue down there, that's the school age population we're talking about. The green is total. So the green population, they're still projecting that we're, as a state, going to be growing. But it's not, but essentially, it's flat
It's not
school age children. And so that percentage is going down.
There's also built in a little bit of a life expectancy increase, and so as the population ages, we have fewer deaths in that time period. So that's some of the things that they put in there. They call it their Utah demographic and economic model.
My wife turns 40 today, and I told her, I'm hoping for her to have at least another 40, but hopefully 2 40s. So she might be, over there still kicking easily in 2065, and so, but that kind of gives you the long-term picture. It's kind of for me. It's a little hard to how can we be exploding as a state and not as a system? And really, the reason is this, and we're still, if you look right in the middle of that graph is where we are in 2025. We're at about 20%. One of the fascinating things, and we can post the Gardner Policy Report. They compare what the percentage of school age population is for every state, and we're definitely well above average. But there are many states in the low teens already, with a much older population. on average. So anyways, so over here, so okay, so 2052 from trough to peak. So it's still gaining by 118,000. So yeah, so rather than gaining 159,000, we're gaining 118,000. And so the net change is dramatic. It goes from, projected net increase of 108,000 to 22,000. Yeah. That's the net change. Correct. It's essentially 700,000, 74,000. And so if we stay at 90% of that, and that's also a big assumption with all the policy changes and how the sectors are changing and those sort of things. But this is why I started with this with the superintendent, because they need to know that there are macro factors well beyond their control, well beyond any of our control, that will significantly affect the overall population. So even if you are, as a district or a charter, really good at attracting kids, the pool of kids is going down. And there's just, that's just where it goes. Sure.
So I'm so grateful that you're presenting to the superintendents. I mean, we need to understand this picture, and I really would welcome an opportunity to dive deeper with the Gardner information, and so that we just kind of understand the big picture. But the challenge is at the superintendent level, local areas where, what's happening in Salt Lake County is not going to be happening in San Juan County. What's going to happen in Salem, Utah is not what's going to be happening in Tooele. Every location, those administrators and their teams have got to do some really thorough, comprehensive digging and planning and projecting. And unfortunately, I don't know that all of us have been trained in our former lives to be able to look at this kind of a big picture and make sense of it. I look, for example, at a community like Salem, where they're projecting 10,000 new homes. So in a normal, when I was on the local school board, when Arrive Homes or whatever bought all of this farmland between here and the freeway, we decide, okay, well, we're going to need an elementary school, so let's buy some property right now, even though they haven't done anything in terms of improvement or getting ready. But those homes are coming, and they're saying they're coming in the next 3 years. So 3 years, we have 10,000 new homes with how many kids? Well, of course, we got to take into consideration how many, with the economic situation being what it is, how many parents are going to really have the numbers of kids that they might have had 5 years ago. And what kind of population is moving into those 10,000 homes? How much of the current population are reaching that stage of kids are out of the house and we're just empty nesters now? And with the extended expectancy of life, there's going to be fewer and fewer people that are supportive of building programs with the air. Okay, we did this. Been there, done that, and our kids are gone. We are worried about our grandkids. There's just so many factors that those local leaders of public education are going to have to consider. But if there are 10,000 new homes in Salem, that
there are going to be some students there for sure.
For sure.
How many?
And unless we increase student transportation, which we know has been a difficult situation for decades and will undoubtedly continue to be, we're gonna, we've got to bus the kids from somewhere to a school that is located right in the middle of all the empty nesters and all of the aging population. And there's no need for a school there, but we sure as heck could use it over out there in the fields where they just built several thousand new homes. So these challenges are real, and they're unforgiving. When the houses are built and the people move in, the kids are going to be there and they're going to be waiting for the bus. Or they're waiting for the school building to be ready to prepare them. Good luck to all of us. I mean, by then I'm going to be sitting on my porch sipping lemonade or something. But you folks that are here for the long haul, wow, we need this information is so valuable, and to communicate that and to get them to get people to start thinking, moving, planning, strategizing in a fairly aggressive, progressive way would be a pretty good policy for public education, because we don't want to be taught without the resources and some means of educating our citizens.
Chair Davis, may I respond? Because there's a couple of great things that Board Member Booth, I absolutely agree. One of the takeaways after this presentation, we asked the Gardner Policy Institute didn't just provide statewide projections, they provided by county. This exactly by county. So we said, hey, would you like these by county for your county? And they said, absolutely. And I know Winona is creating those right now. And we're trying to take advantage of AI so we can be more efficient in that. So, but even if, so Davis County, that's great at the macro level, right? But where in Davis County? Do you build this? Because it's going to be very difficult to go out for a bond if you're closing schools on one side of the district and building schools on the other. That's what Alpine's been dealing with. And so we can provide, that provides some better context, but take Utah County, for example, an overall number is going to look very different on the ground for Provo School District as it will Nebo schools, and even within Nebo schools. And so absolutely, this is going to be a challenge from a planning and because when that subdivision goes up, there's going to be an expectation that there's a school there. And schools don't show up overnight, right? So.
Well, thank you so much. We, Chair Hammonds, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I just wondered, simple, are we getting this information to our LEAs? Like, we have this discussion here, right? Are we sharing it with them so that they have that understanding, right? They're the decision makers in this. We sit back and we watch and say, oh, we don't want to close a school, or, we can't afford to open a school, but they're the ones who are really before the public. So how do we get this, to your point, Randy, to them to say this will inform your decision?
So, Chair Davis, I'll quickly answer. We started with the LEAs on this, or on the district side. We haven't sat down and talked to all of the charter directors. They need to know this for their areas too. we want to disseminate the information far and wide, and we're not asking for additional FTE for our team. We're trying to make use of and just be future focused and customer oriented in that respect, because absolutely the hard decisions, and especially the tricky ones, most of them are at the LEA level.
And I do think I like the language future focused and customer centered, because, as we think about our customers, our taxpayers, our children in the state of Utah, as we're making requests for funds, we're going to need to be constantly forward thinking about, okay, what is that going to look like? What are the needs going to be, and how are these changes? We just talked about how it might be good to do a workshop on this at our summer workshop this summer. It'd be a great time. Let's go ahead and do the mid-year updates, and appreciate that presentation. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And I just thought, that context was important for superintendent. Wanted to share that with you.
Can I, before you start, say, someone said we've been burning the midnight oil to get these mid-year updates done. And I just want to emphasize that again, that, there's all, board members have other requests and things, we want business, and our folks are like, well, can we do that after the mid-year updates? Can we do have the mid-year updates? We're trying to get the mid-year updates done, and we know, and we see you, and we appreciate you, and we know that it's been a very heavy lift. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Vice Chair Davis. These are the most significant budget updates that LEAs receive every year. And we want to be funding actual students to the extent possible. And we can't always, we have to deal with projections, but we always want to make sure that those projections are trued up, and then do that as early as possible. So if LEAs have to adjust with the budget, they have more time to do so. So that's why we work really hard to get these done in November, when it's a quick time frame. Once we get the October 1 counts, we only have a few weeks really to get these done and in budgets and processing Utah grants and out. All right. So just very, very briefly, here's the calendar again. This shows I just wanted to show you kind of where the 2026 budget came from, where we are in the process. So this goes from July 2024 through June 2026. Those purple squares, those are the ones that relate to 2026. But we're always working on essentially 2 years at the same time. So, we just went through the 2027 budget request process with the Common Data Committee to set next year's base budget. And some of the data points I showed you, I think it was last month, were part of that. And so, we just finished, you can see the mid-year update for 2026. So the biggest data points are all of the October 1 enrollment counts. And so that's beyond just, kids in each grade, but that's special education counts, that's free reduced price lunch, limited English proficiency counts, all of those kind of things. And then we also need to update to actual ADM. When we create the legislative estimates after the session, the school year's not over. And ADM takes the entire year to generate, because every day of the school year is when you generate membership days. So we have to create estimated 25 ADM, and then we're turning up the actual 25 ADM. And so, there are a lot, we'll go through some examples here, but there are a lot of times where right now I'm answering LEA questions that are like, wait, why did my allocation go down? And it was like, we're trying to help you understand, here was your estimated ADM. Here's your actual ADM. If it comes in underneath, your budget's going down, kind of thing. So here are the data points to really pay attention to. We went through that, I hope, in enough detail where they're paying attention to it in our fall training, where we went program by program and said, pay attention to these data points. And so, at some point, and some LEAs do it very well, and some LEAs come to us and ask a question where I'm like, you should have known that a year ago. That's just kind of how a big system works. As you see in 26 final updates, that happens in April, May. The only real data point that we have there are the final tax collections. So we need to know, okay, so if we estimated that Alpine School District was going to collect $70 million from the basic levy, and that's getting netted from their grades 1 through 12 allocation. If they actually collect 65 million, their state aid goes up by 5. If they collect 75 million, I think I did that right, their state aid goes down by 5 million. And so that's really the last thing that that gets trued up there. But luckily in that respect, that doesn't really change their budget for the most part, because they know what their local revenues are coming in, and it's just changing the source of the revenue. So the WPUs for this year pretty much are set. There's a few random exceptions we can talk about, but they're pretty much set. Does that help with the calendar? Any questions on the calendar? Yep. So just want to orient you again about what our projected changes were. We projected that the system would be down 7,800 students, with districts down 9,451 and charters up 1,637. And in percentage terms, districts down by 1.6%, charters up by 2%. When you see that enrollment growth number for the base budget, if you look back, that was based on that 1.17%. So where we came in was we were actually down 1.73%. Charters are actually up more than we thought, and districts are down more than. So these numbers are now reflecting the mid-year updates, and most of what I'm going to show you is how that affects balances by program. And so if a balance goes up, that means that costs in the program have gone down. If balances are going down, that means costs in the program go up. And so it's a little counterintuitive there. But you'll see these things reflected as we go out. You'll see the same kind of trends on the funding program. Okay, so there are 30 plus programs in the minimum school program. I'm only showing you the ones that are really driving the change. And this is the main table I wanted to go over. At the end of the day, I wanted this bottom right-hand corner, $12 million. So the net change from all of these things, these changes are, the costs are going down by $12 million. That's the good things. And so our projected balance is going up by $12 million. There are certain programs that are going where their increased costs will kind of go through Y. There are those that have decreased costs and so forth. Okay. So on the basic school program side, our projected balances are going up by $4 million. Related to basic, so this is all of those categoricals, down by $5 million, and that's principally driven by the increase in the charter school side. So charter school local replacement is one of their very important funding streams. If we have 2,000 more charter school students than we projected, that's going to be an additional $7 million. And then voted and board, this is the most uncertain on the balance side because voted and board is heavily driven by the property tax collections. So we project truing up to not final data, but what we do in the mid-year updates is we go from those CDC estimates, which are made fall the year before, to the tax commission estimates, which are made during the summer. So they're essentially, 9 months more current. And they are also the budgets on which, property tax rates are set, and it aligns with what school districts are using. So that's where we go. I'm going to drill down into each program that we're showing here, or at least most of them. So kindergarten, why did we have increased costs essentially of $6 million? Well, and especially since the number of kindergartners, again, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Well, the main reason why over here is full day K. So you can see charter school students, you'll see this trend again, districts are down, charters are up. But on the full day K side, interestingly, even though full day K So you'll see there's half of the table above compares the projected October 1 total K counts to the actuals, and then the projected FUK counts. So charter schools were up significantly more than projected in full day K. And so you can see the percentages there. So even though the number of full day K students went down in school districts, the percentage actually went up because their full day K went down less than all English. And then charter school students went up quite a bit. And so it's essentially those additional dollars are more students are generating the full WPU, not the half WPU for half of K. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then there's this whole, I'm going to go through this prior year plus growth calculation. I don't know if you've heard of the K-12 hold harmless provision. That's the other part of it where the downside is kind of mitigated for 1 year, but the upside is paid for. That's the other reason why, so like even though districts saw decreases, their WPUs actually went up slightly. And so, we went through a lot of detail in the fall training and went through trying to show why that was for the school districts. We went through the school districts that gained the most WPUs in kindergarten and lost. We can go through that level of detail, but it's not in this presentation. But a lot of it is because of that hold harmless provision. And we'll go into that a little more on the K-12 side. But yes.
I'm not if I ask a question. I don't expect you to get this granular right now for sure, but by area, do we have this by area too? I mean, can we see, is it happening in rural areas that there's a move from, traditional public schools to charter schools? Is that happening in the urban areas? Do we know that?
We do.
Okay.
Because we know all the changes by LEA, and we can geocode any LEA and show you those changes depending on how you want to see it. So, the simplest way would, and that may be enough, but if I may ask, we can show these shifts by district, including charter school district of enrollment students. And then we can show how did they change by overall district area in terms of percentage of full day K, is that what we're talking about? Or if the kindergarten population is staying relatively flat in rural areas, but has gone down in suburban areas.
Right. That's what I'm, but again, like I said, I don't expect you to answer that here, but I just wanted to know if that information is something we can kind of break down and look at moving forward in the future.
So Chair Davis, that might be a data request where the first step we can do on that, which would be the simplest lift, would be to look at this by district, including district of enrollment. So the charter school students are in there too. And so, that does mask, for example, what's happening with an Alpine school district, right? But in a couple of years, you'll see that a little more when it's 3 school districts. But certainly within Salt Lake County, you'll see that with different trend. That would be a good place to start. If we want to go more granular, we might be able to do it at the school level. That's where it gets a little harder. So we can look and see if it's very hard, because ideally it'd be done at the school level, and we have these abstracts and data points by school. So we can look in that if that's desired.
With no objection from the committee, can we ask that of our staff?
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Funding data project. Okay.
Wait, how long is that going to take you?
Well, the reason why I said let's, in general, because our time is very limited, we look at what data points do we already have.
Mm-hmm.
So We would see if it's going to take more than 5 working hours, we'd probably come back and say, but we can create something that would be very informative within 4 or 5 hours.
Thank you.
Not that part of it.
Appreciate it. And come back if it's going to be more than that, we'll reevaluate.
We're not talking about 80 hours or 100.
I'm seeing nods about coming back to us so we can reevaluate if it's longer.
So grades 1 through 12. So this is where a lot of the savings occurred. We expected to see that because grades 1 through 12 doesn't have the wrinkle of full day K and that sort of thing, and the population is decreasing. So charters, but again, this goes to that prior year plus growth, and I was going to show you districts did receive fewer WPUs than mid-year updates, but they're down less than the drops in their enrollment. And that's because of that harmless essentially, because you get the higher prior year ADM or prior year plus growth. So if you're seeing year-over-year increases in your October 1 counts, you get that increase. So that's why charter schools, if you go back to the overall enrollment projections here, charter schools are up 4%, and their grades 1 through 12 WPs went up by 2.5%. So it's at least closer than the drop on the school district side. And obviously this is not uniform across LEAs. There are charters that went up and charters that went down, and same thing with school districts.
Sure. Just briefly, Dale, did you notice that where school districts went down, charters went down as well? Is it more of the area than it is the school? Or where's the correlation there?
Right.
There has to be some correlation, right? I don't believe that all district schools are just saying, you know what, we're going charter now, right? I know that Chihuahua County they had some growth from charts, and I think there was another one, the Beaver, that had growth. Anyway, so
Yeah,
I wonder if it's more area. Yeah, you're going to see an increase in charters, but even with the decrease, it didn't decrease as much. Or
so, Chair, that usually when we're doing our work, we're looking at a statewide level, and we see a whole list of charters, and they're not broken out by region and those sort of things. So that's where kind of the school-based analysis would be helpful to look at it more regionally. So looking at it a different way. And that's why we have the data. It's just, you just need to sort it in a different way, sort of thing. I wouldn't be able to tell you, most of my analysis is looking by overall sector. And I can pull some trends from that. One of the things I didn't show you in the other presentation that that was the request, was what's the year-over-year change between districts and charters by grade level. So that was another thing that we showed the superintendents. So, overall what we found was, the shift was primarily in the early grades, not in the later grades. So yes, they saw some growth, charters did, in grades 7 through 12, the secondary grades, but mostly it was in grades 3 through 6.
thank you. I appreciate that. And if you need to know where those schools are, I have 1/15 of a map that you can borrow.
We'll pull a trend from one data point. So
Yes.
Number map.
So K through 12, or 1 through 12, in the school districts, you experience a drop in the number of students and so forth. You have fewer WPUs. So now my question is, how did any idea of how that impacted our educators? How many teacher contracts did you have that now that we have the actuals, we have to reduction of those teachers? How do we deal with that? this is the only way we determine what we can do this year, actually year after year. But when you see that kind of a significant unexpected drop, you know, the students will take that drop in every educating that we can kind of take back and just it's a statewide. It's retaining and attracting good educators is such a critical issue on this priorities. If we're letting a lot of them, we have to let a lot of them go because of changes like this, unexpected changes. Any idea where we're at on that?
Chair Davis, may I answer that? And I'll probably ask Director Yuri to provide more kind of local perspective from his past there. These changes were not all unexpected. The magnitude of the changes were larger than we expected, right? We've been projecting since well before the legislative estimates, you know, the drops, right? So, you know, and I imagine it varies by LEA. And these drops in WPUs are with that hold harmless provision in place. So, you know, districts, rather than if that wasn't in place, I think I'll go through it with a couple of examples. Yeah. So if you dropped, if the rather than 0.5% change, it's 2%, you're looking at 10,000 WPUs, not 2,500. And so, but how much they budgeted for that drop, you know, because we try to make it very clear, the legislative estimates are estimates. You LEAs need to manage your budgets. You know where you end up on the ADM side in the summer, okay, or, you know, early summer, and you have your own projections and you need to have contingency plans. So let me ask Director Yuri how you dealt with it when you were a BA for a couple charters and if you had any other thoughts.
Yeah, and actually we'll have the educator counts, which actually went up slightly. Over
Districts did go down, but only 100 or so across all districts.
right from year to year. We are not aware of and don't anticipate any reductions in forcing educators during this school year due to these changes. But you know, if it were a situation where the hold harmless did not exist, which could be a possibility as we're in budget scenarios like we are and declining enrollment. But if that were the case, then
That's more likely.
becomes more likely. You know, if a district is off in their projections and they reduce more heavily than they expected. You know, I talked to a district like Davis School District, and they feel like their 5-year projections are really, really close to what actually happened. They have a good pulse on their specific district. There are other factors too that you can consider and whether they increase class sizes rather than reduce educators, or you know, there are other considerations that even though the number of WPUs might be going down, at least the value of the WPU is going up, and other things of that nature. They may make other budgetary cuts prior to you know, potentially cutting educators. So there's a lot that goes into it locally, but due to these changes, we're not aware of or not anticipating any mid-year reductions in force.
Is that hold harmless the one that was tied to support for Amendment G, or is that a different hold harmless?
Sure. No, that's been around for decades.
This one has been around for decades.
Around for decades. Yeah. So one other piece to this, these look like large numbers, and they are, but sometimes you have to put them in perspective, right? Yeah, $4 million change. The grades 1 through 12 program is the largest program in the entire state budget. Okay, so $4 million out of $2 billion is actually a pretty stable budget, you know? And so I'm not saying that LEAs don't have to adjust, And where I actually see the biggest adjustments are on the charter school side, especially those that didn't project very well, or, and so, but, I have not heard of teachers immediately being fired. But, budgets, we essentially broadcasting budgets are going to go down slightly. They went down slightly more for school districts. But, like take Davis, for example, they had internal projections that were more accurate than we do, and they should. And so they should have been planning for that. Maybe, we're only going to budget 99% of our grades 1 through 12 funding because we think this other is going to change in mid-year updates.
Why is it going down? It is because the hold harmless provision doesn't cover the total loss.
So, yeah, was a lot of people think the hold harmless provision means that we're not going to go down through legislative estimates. That's not what it means, which is why, I keep banging the drum to say, look at your data points. And so the top data point here, the basis of the grades 1 through 12 program is ADM. It's not October 1 counts. ADM is essentially your average enrollment throughout the entire year. And we have to estimate that. That 0.5% drop in WPUs is not really driven, is principally driven by us underestimating the ADM by 0.5%. So if that's your baseline and we estimate you're going to be at, an ADM of 1,000 and you're getting 1,000 WPUs, if you come in at 970 ADM, your baseline starting is 970. And regardless of what happened with October 1 counts. And so those 30 WPUs are kind of what we're talking about, that it's their responsibility to kind of project forward and figure out how much of the legislative estimates can we count on, how much is uncertain, until we get final data points. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we've already talked about that hold harmless provision a little bit here. I just wanted to show you how it plays out with the 3 examples. So here's Needle, Twill, and Salt Lake. Those some that you might be familiar with. Over here, Needle, and so again, this is K-12. The statute says that you do this hold harmless provision at the K-12 level. So you might actually see a decline in kindergarten and an increase in grades 1 through 12 or vice versa, kind of thing. So Needle and Salt Lake saw declining enrollments. So their K-12 WPUs are based on fiscal 25 data. Okay. Tooele saw increasing enrollments, barely, but slightly increasing, right? It's great. And so theirs are based on the fiscal 26 data. So the October 1 counts did go into effect there. So you can kind of see with Nebo at that level, what they get is essentially the difference. They get the higher of that prior year plus growth, right? So the difference was between those two calculations, 916 for Nebo, which is basically the hold harmless benefit of Nebo by, we estimated 916 WPUs, turns out it was 1,200 WPUs was the benefit. And so if that prior plus growth provision goes away, in this situation, Tooele is unaffected, right? But Nebo and Salt Lake, their budgets would have been $5.7 million lower, in Salt Lake, $3.9 million. That's if it went away, because they would be, we would have to factor in the drops in enrollment on the October 1 side, which we didn't for those two. And this is just for this one program, but it is the largest program in the state.
What percent of the actual drop does the hold harmless cover?
Chair, when we say drop, what drop of what?
Well, drop in enrollment. It's tied to drop in enrollment, right? The
So the
losses.
statewide cost, we calculated this year at $77 million.
So during the CDC process, we were asked to calculate what is the you know, essentially, so it'd be those two, but for across all LEAs. The drop would be $77 million this year if it went into effect immediately.
Out of all state funds
Out of
for the whole budget.
out of $2.5 billion, $3 billion. So it is a small part, but it is important in that, you know, this provides some stability between those. And of the $77 million, 76 are for school districts, even a little more than that. And that's because the drops in enrollments we're seeing are primarily on the school district side. There are a few charters that are benefiting across the board, but does that help cheer this?
Yes.
And I think it's probably, so many of those enrollments, probably the majority, are covered in that $77 million number, but I have to go back anyway.
And you're saying potentially this is gonna go away because it's gonna cost more and more for the legislature.
So the legislature would have to change the law for it to go away. But last year they asked me to measure that, and I forget what it was. It was in the $50-60 million range. Now this year is $77 million. As enrollment drops increase, the cost of the hold harmless increase. So when the population overall is going up, that hold harmless provision might have only cost $5, $10, $15 million.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's only for 1 year.
It's just a one move. Oh, I did measure that. There you go, are the numbers by sector. So yeah, the cost would be 76 million for school districts and 700,000. So that's K-12. All right, so this next area here, I'm going to openly acknowledge that
Can I ask you a quick question? I'm so sorry. Why would there be a loss for charters if they grew?
not every charter group. So
But
this,
that's an overall chart though.
yeah, so the hold harmless is calculated by LEA. So most of the charters are in the Tooele camp, but let's say 10% or 5% are like Nebo and Salt Lake in this case.
That would just
That's
be
where the 700,000.
total loss, even though others have things. It's not a system one.
Yeah, this specific graph is just tracking hold harmless as it applies.
Okay.
That PPG means, so that first column, it's with prior year plus growth, and then without prior year plus growth, which essentially means it's that greater of.
Mm-hmm.
If you just get, up or down, it's based on what your enrollments are, multiplied by your prior year AD on, that's that second
Okay.
column.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in the provisions, you don't get more under the hold harmless, that's zero, right? It's if it went away. So it's, in the case of Chair Hyman's and his charter, that going away doesn't affect his charter, but it would affect the neighborhood. Okay. So immunization non-compliance, this is a fun one. So I came in the tail end of 22 in this position here. And I knew that in past years before the pandemic, there were WPUs that were deducted for those students who were not complying with the immunization standards. But this, I wanted to, we're re-implementing that this year. And part of it was a capacity issue for the team. Part of it was a misunderstanding on what was required. This was the year where I finally had time to really dig into it and put it back. But there have been concerns from some LEAs that they weren't noticed about this and that they can't change this. Luckily, I want to say that up front. We're working with DHHS to figure out how we can improve training on this so that folks understand it going forward and all that. But let me very quickly show you, these are the percentages of the total student population. These are data points that came from DHHS from 2015 to 2055. A very small portion are not in compliance, but there are a number of different exemptions and conditions for which you can that you can qualify for, and that number of students under that kind of yellow category that has gone up. So very few students are in the not in compliance where you're not getting an exemption, it's not conditional, or you have a student with a history of disease. I'm not a public health person either, so I'm learning about this. So at a very high level, schools they have to fill out this report to DHHS, and they have to identify, so they start in January and then they go back, and then DHHS comes back in the year, and during that time, according to DHHS, they help schools to try to get as many students compliant or receive their conditional status or those sort of things. But at the end of the year, how many students were not actually compliant? You can see Alpine, for example, they said 2 and 3, but they also said 0 membership days, which doesn't make much sense. So the practice beforehand, and so all the statute says is that students who are not compliant according to the immunization requirement of the statute can't generate WPs. Well, we can show it. And so the challenge is the data points that we have, we can't remember how WPs are in many, many different programs based on different classifications of students and these sort of things.
Yeah, and that's not students who are exempt.
No.
It's just a non-compliance issue.
It's the red bars.
Okay.
So
it's really interesting. They use a policy lever.
So I wanted to point out a few things here. There's why does Duchesne have more students here and more membership days? There's, I think, a lot of variability on how folks providing this data are actually counting things. And I have concerns about kind of the perverse incentive that those who are doing the right thing lose money. But all of that besides the point. So
But those would be in the yellow. Those would still get funding for that.
Yeah, they get.
It's just the red.
So yeah, let me clarify what happens here and what happened in the past and what we're doing here.
Could get a little.
And I do think this may be a policymaker conversation that you want to have, but it's in statute. You can't just change a rule. So if you look back here, you can see the students the ADM that were not compliant, and not a lot of ADM. We're talking about 45 to 20 to 10. And so there were state funds withheld, but again, not very many. 2020, the data was not collected during the pandemic. And again, I saw this data starting maybe 24, maybe 23. I didn't know I had to do something with it. And so 25 was the first time that I really looked into it and still thought maybe this got waived. I didn't know about the statutory requirement. So I've been doing a lot of research on that. This is the first year since then that we're implementing it. And you can see the deductions are much larger, 600,000, because of the 129 ADM. So those are the membership days that are reported. And I've had questions from certain LEAs. So the nurse from North San Pete said, how do we fix this? And I said, well, for last year, this is the practice. We implemented the practice as it was before. it says you can't receive the WPUs or try and implement the statute. What we can do is try to address it for next year. And, so I'm actually presenting on this stuff to a webinar of school nurses in January, trying to help them understand, are you accurately recording your days of membership? Because it doesn't make sense to have students and no days of membership, but there are also other times where you have more days of membership than you do students. Students don't generate more than 180 days. There are data concerns across the board. So it's kind of a rock and a hard place. We need to implement the statute, So I want to be transparent with this. This does not, put me in the best light, but we're trying to follow the law and as it's written.
When you say address for next year, are you saying that we need to seek a statutory change, or are you saying that you would suggest just working with schools like you're doing to help them understand the data entry
Correct.
is
So
impacting
that they understand the
numbers.
impacts and that they're, so if, for example, you have 10 students in January who are not exempted or compliant but then if they can get them compliant by the end of the year and minimize those days of membership that are out of compliance, that would minimize the withholding next year. That's all I'm
Thank
saying. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the question, right? I go through this every year. And it's like, well, they haven't gotten an exemption, but they haven't done anything, and now we're accountable. You're not gonna get paid for them, but you can't just unenroll them.
There are a lot of questions. I have more questions than answers here. I just wanted to transparently show you that this is how it was implemented before, and the statute never changed. There was not data for a year, maybe two, and then it was due to turnover internally here and capacity. So, I think there are many different policy conversations that can be made about this, and some of them are related to the statute or just practice. I don't think there's anything in rules specifically about this because it's the statute governing. Okay. Yes. So I did want to show you kind of how that affected and kind of so we're deducting these from the grades 1 through 12 program. That's 600,000. Okay. I spent a lot of time on K-12, but those are, the biggest programs. So going a little more quickly through these other ones. So NES, the overall impact, so there were some savings, but because of the new formula, is relatively minimal. Same thing with special ed add-on. The larger savings on the students at risk add-on, I wanted to show you that. WPUs were down. So, these are the October 1 counts for students who qualify for free and reduced price lunch and are English language learners. So districts are down, charters are up. So our economically disadvantaged count comparing year over year for districts are down 8,300. There was charters up over 1,000, so net change of 7,000. I know there. So Weber came back and they said they didn't report all of that. There was a systems issue, but these counts are what they are. So some of this might be, that's why Scott sends out these very scary letters saying, check your data, make sure it's right, because we can't change that after the fact. But so maybe not all of this drop is actual students dropping that qualify for this, but most of it is. Then English language learners, that those counts drop for both charters and districts, 3,000 kiddos on the October 1 event. That's what drove the savings in this program of almost $5 million. So with all of those, the net change was the $4 million. Any questions about the WPU-based program?
Could you go back to the English language learning slide for a second?
LEP means limited English proficiency.
Thank you.
And if you want to get technical, it's the Y and O count. So these are the non-fluent.
Only category where both districts and charters had losses.
Or more students qualified as fluent. I don't know. I don't know the story. I just report the data. So I'd have to look more into that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, charter school local replacement, those costs went up because, we underprojected by 1,800 students. Can you see the story there? So that is a cost that could be covered by a supplemental or balances, depending on how the legislature wants to do that. Okay, educator salary adjustment. So we saw savings this year, and I spent some time on this one during fall finance training. Sam referenced this. So these are the actual year-over-year changes at the bottom by sector. So districts had 132 essentially FTE fewer that qualified for ESA. Charters saw 136. So we saw it's essentially flat. 11 educators across the entire system. So we're not decreasing on educators yet. And so I can't tell you if this is meaningfully driving changes to, class sizes on an aggregate level. We hope, but okay.
May I just make a quick comment, Chair?
Yes, please.
I just want to, for the public and for anyone that might be listening to my district and to my charters, we are so blessed to have this brain trust in Dale and in Director Yuri and Deborah and this team around this table. If your institutional knowledge was not there in terms of the complexity of the curriculum listen, I think we would be bottled up and we would be in stage trouble. I can't even imagine us functioning. And we are brought into the loop with, okay, here's an update. You need to know this, you need to know this. And then as soon as it's, in many cases, we can let it go if we're moving on to the reading program or we're moving on to whatever else. But you have to live with this and with the consequences of what happens at mid-year and what happens on October 2nd and what happens with all of the various checkpoints to keep us solvent and to keep us operational. And I am just blown away by the amount of perspective and knowledge that you've got in here. I hope you're not going anywhere for a long time because the transfer of that information, with all of us coming in and out of the loop on a pretty regular basis, every 4 years or whatever. Wow, this is challenging data that needs to be kept in perspective, or you could cry wolf and go running around like a crazy person because it's frightening to see what the potential is and how vulnerable we are. But with the data and with the perspective that you bring and your team brings to this, I think, boy, it's getting managed. And we're in a position to keep advocating for kids. So thank you. That's a long way from saying thank you, but we're very, very grateful.
I'm going to piggyback on that for LEAs who are listening, just to say, well, how can I be sure that these are accurate? Because this is their lifeblood, right? But we've gone for several years, kudos to Deputy Jones and his team, without having any material findings in audits. We've been audited several times by outside agencies, and our audits come out really great every time. And so, kudos to you. But I have had this question in the back of my head. How many eyes are on these numbers before we go out and distribute funds or give this information to the LEAs? How many eyes are on these numbers? Is it just one person who's calculating this? I think in the beginning you said maybe someone double checked, but could you just be a little explicit with that for us so that our LEAs know?
Sure. Chair, can I give you an example here?
Yes.
Because any mistake in these numbers, and especially the calculation, can be millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So we absolutely take it incredibly seriously to get everything right. So to put in perspective, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but there's about 3,000 allocations or so. So if you take every single one of these programs and all the calculations, we've had to adjust one. And that was for a new charter because we missed a manual update. So that was elevated charter school for their 7, because they added 7 through 8 students and 9 through 12. They came to us, we looked through it, you're like, you're right, and we're adjusting your budget this month. So not saying it's right all the time, we do not pretend to be perfect, but we try hard. So what do we do to make sure our calculations are correct? Well, so first, what we did, and how do we make sure that if one of us gets hit by a bus, we try to make sure.
Don't even put that out there. Please.
Winona's doing a great job. I'm not very good at writing SOPs and these sort of things. She's great at that, and we're working on documenting everything. And I'm trying to transfer as much of my knowledge to her as possible, and she's been doing really, really great. In addition, we calculate the numbers 2 different ways. So when you move from the legislative estimates to the mid-year updates, you can do it 2 different ways. You can take your spreadsheet and from the legislative estimates and update the data. Or you can take the last year, but then you have to update any kind of nuanced changes in calculation. Or you take last year's mid-year updates, and so if you do it both ways and your numbers match, that helps. In addition, this is, the NSPA system, which we've been using internally. We're going to be providing access in the spring to LEAs. Let me just show you here. This system here calculates, so here's the charter K-12 steps. So, sorry, I need to go to the reference because this is the reference. So we've coded in, all these different steps, and what MSPA does to, it's about 70. It pulls from our different system and calculates these things out. So if I go here, it shows you what the weights are. Here's all the data points. Here's every step calculated. And then at the very end, we make sure that we are matching to less than a cent. Okay. So the reason why we missed that one is because I haven't coded for new charters perfectly. It's kind of that unique case that we have to. So that's something I'm going to be working on to update MSPA. So we do all of this and to make sure we feel really good about our calculations. Because if you do it 3 different ways, the system doing it 2 different people, and then Sam reviews everything, and then we try to go to the LEAs and say, check our math. Because at the end of the day, how do you build trust? If folks who are receiving these changes can check the math. And then if they have any questions, we walk them through it on the way. Does that help?
That's exactly what I hoped to hear. Thank you.
And I just, that complexity, 70 steps for one funding stream is.
Oh, and that's just for school districts.
Right. And then that's also reflected in our spreadsheets. Maybe pull up the K through 12 spreadsheet. So Dell's not just doing that in Excel, but we're doing it in MSP as well. And then we're double checking, triple checking reports and
So yeah, this is how it looks on the spreadsheet side. You know, here, those 70 steps are essentially recreating this to get to Alpine's final WPUs. You know, as an example, and here's on the charter side.
I'm sorry, forgive my ignorance. You said 70 steps.
In our system of MSPA, it's not 70 steps in the calculation. So often it's because we have to like build it together. So
Is that a system issue
no, it's just
or a code requirement, or are we doing a validation? We're choosing to do that ourselves to validate.
for me, it's a lot easier to code for 70 steps to make sure each little step works than 10 steps where each step is complex from a coding standpoint.
Got it. Thank you. All right, we'll probably need to, we've derailed a lot with a lot of
I
questions, myself
apologize.
included, but
I'm not trying to.
we'll just cruise through the end and
Yeah.
so we can get to our
So-
next presenter.
Let me go through a couple other things just to transparently show you. And this is what we showed the field. Why is it that if overall ESA counts are essentially flat, that the amounts went down? There's this whole issue. So when ESA, the amount doubled and the legislature tied that to Utah fits all, we now have two parts of ESA because the statute says this part will always be there. This part occurs when Utah fits all is funded. So the base amount of ESA always had a retirement rate contribution of 15.72%. When this was implemented, it provided an opportunity to actually peg the retirement account to something that gets updated each year. So we use the URS tier 2 non-contributory rate. But when we were going through CDC, they made it clear we had it at 1983, which is actually the rate that includes the small employee contribution as well as the employer contribution. So we had to go from 1983 to 1902. So this was a technical change, but it affected budgets. So we wanted you to see that. Okay. Voted and board, here are the changes. Not a lot to say there because we already talked about how we we use the tax commission data now. We're going to be we talked and voted board in detail a couple months ago in this program. So districts get their final allocations once we get the final property tax. So that's still an estimate here. And that's the rest of my presentation. Okay.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. That was, like we said, heavy lift. Deborah, let's go to celebrations.
Well,
Progress, achievements, and improvements.
we just
That was a
have
big
one.
achievement.
Yeah, that by itself is a big achievement.
Yeah, thank you all.
No, we just really, after the audit yesterday, after the report out on the audit yesterday, we really wanted to give a shout out for all staff, really, at the end of the day, because, you know, as demonstrated with MSB, we take all funding seriously. And so that really includes federal grants as well. So they take that very seriously, from the program staff who are the face of the federal grants and actually run the programs, to the accounting staff that reconcile and do the draws and that kind of thing. Our fiscal monitors that actually monitor whether or not the programs and the funding are being spent appropriately. We have an incredible team, and they do the work, and we just want to recognize them.
I appreciate you bringing that up. And I said in full board yesterday, I heard the auditor say tremendous, and I'm going to repeat it again. So you're all tremendous. Thank you. Thank you for that. And let's move to our item 2.71. And let's go to Program Monthly Report on USIMS. IT Director Jared Felt and USIMS Project Manager Katrina Brinkley.
I'll just turn it right over to Katrina if that's okay.
Thanks, Director Felt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Cami, are you able to share, or would you like me to share the one pager this morning?
Let me see if I can pull it up. Hang on just one sec.
Thank you. I can pull it up if it's too much of a balance of trying to pull all these pages. There we go. Excellent. So quick updates. We are still working on getting the Cactus, the USIMS deployment for the educator domain. There were some nuances that were discovered in some of our LEA testing, so they are going back and ensuring that those fixes are in place before we disable Cactus for the LEA users. So we'll be doing what's called a soft release this next month, which will allow specific LEAs to use the system in both USIMS and Cactus to kind of compare and contrast and make sure that things are functioning as expected. And once that soft release is completed and we've got feedback and if ensured that things are going well, we'll release to the rest of the state. And that is ongoing. We've got people testing in there right now. So that will continue. For the finance domain, we're working on some viewing of budgets and actual data. I'm working on certifying some data validation coming from the actual LEAs. We've got 2 LEAs who have submitted their actuals for 2024, 2025, I guess. And that data is in the system. And then for the student domain, we are working on student course grades in history and working on some API access management. We've recently set it up so that our LEAs can log into USIMS and manage the access for their SIS vendors to send and receive data. So an LEA administrator could log into USIMS and say, hey, I want this SIS vendor to have the ability to send data via the API. And then we are also working on some IEP notifications. So the goal is right now that they can just send a notification from one LEA to another stating, hey, you just had a student who enrolled in your school who may have an IEP. Please log in and check their information. And we're working on some email notifications, and eventually that will be the movement of the full IEP from LEA to LEA. We are currently exploring some of the nuances of being able to do that because we don't have a statewide LEA or IEP system, and a lot of IEPs are managed and maintained in different ways. So doing a statewide implementation of something like that is requiring a little bit of work. So we're looking into that. And I think that is a quick summary for you of what we're doing on USIMS right now.
Thank you so much. I just really appreciate that summary and want to just remind our committee that we have like 50 contractors working on this thing. Am I right? Is that right? The right number?
We have 39. We have 39 people on my teams, and 32 of those, I think, are contractors. I don't have the exact numbers today, but yeah, a lot.
So we have 30 plus contractors, but then we have some full-time FTE on top of those contractors that are working really hard to get this done. And it's a lot. And I just want to paint a picture that I've been guilty of this in the past by saying, when is this going to be done? And so now I've started using air quotes and saying, when are we going to be air quote done? Because when we get it to kind of a baseline working level, I mean, we have funding for 18 more months, right? And then when that's gone, it's not like we can end, because every time code changes, we're going to have to make changes to this system, and that's going to take additional work. And then also, every time anyone in our agency makes a decision and says, well, we want to use this different new program for our thing, these guys have to do a bunch of work to make it work within the system. And I don't know that I certainly don't have a full grasp of the work that takes. And so I want to just, I'm trying to learn more and get better. But I just want to give a shout out to Katrina and Jared and Deputy Jones and the whole team. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And let's go to Program Grants Manager Rebecca Nielsen and Assistant Superintendent Jacobson to move on to 2.7, unless we have questions. And I think I missed a hand from Aaron Bruff a while back. I apologize. Director Bruff, do you still have something to add?
I'm okay. It was back and you say, how many people are looking at these numbers? I was just going to share that we also look at those numbers before we even send them over to Dale and Sam and his team. So that was earlier there. I was just going to add some more information. So thank you for just acknowledging.
It's like the prequel to the movie. There's like a whole other step going on before we even start this work. Thank you, Director Bruff, for the work that you do. Appreciate it. I feel like these are sacred funds. You know, people work hard, pay a lot of money in their taxes, and I don't see it as like it's just something you have to do because all these things have to happen. It's like it's a privilege to live in this country. It's a privilege to be able to pay taxes, but it's hard to pay taxes, you know, and we need to view these as sacred and take really good care of these monies. And be grateful to the people who are providing them. But thank you. Let's go to Program Utah Grants now. It looks like I have Assistant Superintendent Jacobson light on.
Yes. So if we can excuse Rebecca today, she's unfortunately sick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so right now we really don't have much of an update on the grant system other than they are currently working on the amendments, the contract amendment, for the new scope of work with our vendor. So we're awaiting that. We were hoping to have it ready for December, but it's not going to be. So we're working on that, making plans for this year. Improving that scope of the system.
Okay, so wonderful. Thank you for that update. We appreciate it. Members, we don't do this very often, but we can, as a committee, request an agenda item. And I'm going to ask today, or just to see if you all are comfortable requesting this agenda item, and if not, I can try to do it on my own to the members. But Superintendent Hart yesterday said we're leaving money on the table. We need to know what we should do about grants. And I asked her if I could speak with her this morning to figure out what she was referring to. And there, Secretary McMahon has a couple of people that are working with her and contacted her and said, you can apply for this money because we're trying to help our systems. And it was $3.5 million, which we need to help make a lot of these changes in our USIMS programs and our other programs to be able to continue that work. And she couldn't apply for the grant because, like, for example, we were able to apply for the IHC grant because it was a private company, but she couldn't apply for the federal grant because it's differentiated in our board rule. And there was only a 2.5 week turnaround till it was ending. And they had called and said, why haven't you applied for this? Or you should, or whatnot. So because the turnaround time ended before we had board meeting, they couldn't apply. And I was thinking way back when we were talking about this in the first place, why does the rule say you can't apply considering some of these short windows? Wouldn't the rule just say you can't accept it? If you're awarded it, you can't accept it unless the board approves when it's over this amount of money. That seems to me more efficient and more economical as far as being able to bring some money in. I just want to have the conversation. So, I'm not making a motion to do anything at this moment other than to ask the committee if you'd be willing to request an agenda item from leadership to bring it back to us so we can read the rule and see what she was talking about yesterday, and then kind of look at the language and decide if and how we want to move forward with it. Is that something that people are comfortable with, or whether, I see two at a time. Member Bogus and then Member Vice Chair Kelly, or Vice Chair Kelly was just pointing at you.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I wondered the same thing. I did wonder too, what in rule prevented Superintendent Hart from doing that. So I think a review of that rule would be good. And I actually thought the same thing. I thought, why wouldn't we give staff permission to apply for those grants? And then ultimately we could make that decision if we were to receive the grant, whether we wanted to, accept the award or not. If we felt like there were strings attached that we weren't willing, or hoops to jump through that we weren't as an agency willing to jump through, then we could ultimately deny that or not accept that award. But I would like to review that rule. I think it would be wise.
Yeah. Member Bogus.
Said to review the rule. I have no objection to that. Actually be in favor of it. In the meeting, I can't recall when it was, but it was recently, so October or November. There was great discussion about our staff applying for grants that we were unaware of, and then using the excuse that they'd already applied for it as acceptance. Mm-hmm. And as I recall looking back, I've watched the boards by 2019. There were a series of events where the USBE staff had applied for a grant, and then all of a sudden the board was shocked about it. And so I don't know exactly when that rule was changed or how that was put in, but I'm assuming it's to address some of that, that the board needs to have knowledge, and the excuse that we've applied and received doesn't mean we should accept. And
Agreed. I thought the same thing.
And so using that as a reason that the board should approve it, hey, we've done all this work, we spent 17 days applying for this. That's not a reason to accept a grant. And so I know that was something that Member Carey in particular probably spent 10 or 15 minutes speaking directly to that issue. We shouldn't accept it just because the work was done. We should accept it because it's good for us, good for kids, and we're willing to do the work after the fact.
Yes.
And so there was a lot of...
So the conversation was apply, right? That's what I think you're saying. We need to get some clarity there.
Something's broken. But yeah. I think that the conversation has been started around a series of events. It started at least back in 2019 when I started training. I think it extends that data earlier, because this has been something that's come a few times.
Yeah.
I think reviewing the rule, if you look at it.
I think so, and I think I just want, if people are listening to this meeting, people to know that Utah accepts comparatively to the rest of the states very little of these. We're very selective in which grants we typically do accept. We have some states that have like 50% of their funding. I haven't done the research, don't ask me for a citation, but Superintendent was telling me some states are really having a hard time not knowing the certainty of federal fundings, because half of their funding is coming from federal right now. But we're very, very selective. But I do think we don't want to hamstring ourselves either for those that have, very great circumstances around them. We want to be able to take that if we want it. But Vice Chair Kelly.
I guess I'm curious, are you looking for a motion to send something to the full board in the January board meeting, or come back?
Well, either one.
To Finance Committee next month.
Actually, what I'm asking is for leadership to decide where they want to agendize it. They could bring it here to committee, or they could send it to the full board, but I think it warrants a discussion to where they feel they can fit it in, if that sounds reasonable. Unless you specifically want it to come to committee first and then go to full board. Sometimes members prefer that.
I know often we often will make motions to direct staff to do this, that, or the other. Is this a situation where we direct staff to bring to us recommendations of rule changes concerning grant applications, or
It's a motion to request an agenda item. And then if we pass that, then the staff would bring the rule wherever they agendize it, unless we want to say specifically bring it back to our committee next month. Which I'm fine to add that to if we want that specificity. Member Vargas?
If we just simply request that they agendize it, okay, and by that, I mean, we put it on the board agenda so that we can address it more expediently. And if the conversation devolves, it's already agendized for the finance committee.
That's a great idea, because it might just take that small change of
Because
acceptance to application.
it could be little and it could devolve very quickly. And if it goes down that path, I don't think we should sit there and spend 2 hours on it. I think we should just have it ready to go for finance.
And that's a great plan, but Sherheim, what are your thoughts?
So I'm thinking about the process, of course, and if a committee votes to put something on the agenda, that to me is actually more transparent than a request form with the 3 members, right? Mm-hmm. This is obviously would be at least 3 if it's not through here. So I don't have a problem with saying, hey, we want this on the agenda, and obviously goes through that, and then leadership can make that determination with executive committee. So I don't have any problem with that. As far as double agendizing it, I don't think I'm in love with that. We talked even last month about processes and how important committees are to the work of the board. And when we have the discussion here, that it gets flushed out so we can reduce time in board meetings and move quicker. The concern that I have with just throwing it on the board is typically that's not done unless there's a rush or overwhelming need, right? And so I don't know if there's a necessity to say, well, and I get we want to put as many eyes on it as possible. That's not the issue. But going through the process of, well, let's put it in a committee, right? And then have the conversation here, which we kind of already have had a little bit of conversation here. And then looking over the rule and making sure, and then taking the board meeting, I think would be more efficient and stay with what has been done along with our process.
Are you comfortable, Member Vargas, if we just slow down a little bit then and just have it come to committee and then go to board meeting next time? No, what he was just trying to.
My point is that we were discussing putting it on the board agenda, and we use the words in love. I wasn't in love with that without a backup from, because then we're 3 months behind instead of 2 months behind.
And I liked
the board meeting on Thursday.
Only technically no. We have to go into February.
We could request it to go to the full board, but then if they can't decide that day, it would go to the February committee and then March full board.
Yes.
Or we can go to February committee or January committee and February full board.
That was my concern. Is it would push us 30 days behind if.
Okay. Thank you, Member Vice Chair.
Help me with the motion, or if this. Okay. Committee request for time in the hiring to that's what I'm wondering. Rather than just review the grant application process, I think.
Yeah, we can take out securing additional funds because that would just be a byproduct, but review the grant application process. I think that's, and rule, the grant application process and rule.
Yeah, and I definitely don't know a rule number, but I mean, can we say, yeah. The committee request that leadership, then we need to request it from leadership if it's coming to committee.
We have to request it be on the agenda.
All right, I move that the committee request that leadership add an agenda item to review the grant application process and rule to evaluate the language.
The care, but as that's written, we are asking for 2 agenda items.
About take out and to review the grant
Yeah,
application rule.
I'm just wondering if
Rule-
that's what we want to
The
do.
grant application rule and process, or process and
Or grant application process rule, then it's one thing, it's just reviewing the rule. Does that work?
Well, I think that I'm just wondering what we want to do, because if we want to do the other, that's fine. But if we want to just look at the rule,
Well, the process is inside the rule, so I think if we.
then this is, I think this is better.
Will that work? Okay. So there's a. Oh, what, is that a number? Okay.
are we keeping the to evaluate the language on the number, which can period after the policy number?
I think we can just do period, but unless someone else wants it. Question.
Thank you. Is this a board policy, staff policy? I would guess it's staff as well, the number alone. And with that, would that be a Superintendent Hart change?
She's gonna make this change, guys.
That's that's why I'm asking, is if this is something that we simply say, Superintendent Hart, can you have this discussion? And then if we don't like the result, we can bring it to the board. I don't know, but it's not our policy to change, from what I understand.
Right, it is, well, this says, I think it is an internal policy. So I can talk to her about that. Because the others.
Member Boggess, you remember, you said that you've been watching since 2019. Do you recall Member Terry bringing forward a rule that was amended or changed?
Don't recall, I could almost exclusively say I don't recall any rule that was discussed, but just the conversations. So now, specifically when grants come to the board for approval with the excuse of you need to approve this because we've already done the work.
So it's an internal control
And
policy.
so the flipping of that seems to have arrived to address that issue. But I don't.
Might need to be adjusted because we're inadvertently. In order to fix the one thing, we're hamstringing ourselves in another.
Here's what I'm thinking. I think we get rid of the policy number as well there, because if there's a rule that may just limit us to only that policy, right? But if we're reviewing the entire grant application process, there might be a rule, there might be policy that we can look at.
Would this be something that's appropriate to agendize in this committee to make a request of staff to look at? Or is this something that you stay out of? Help us, Chair Hamas.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to stay in my lane here, keep the board in its lane here,
Right.
as this is an internal policy. Now, if we wanted to direct staff or request of staff that they look into if this is a rule or somewhere in our policy, that's fine. I mean, I know staff are like kind of searching. If we want to go there, I don't think we're at that point yet where we're agendizing anything because we don't have control over anything.
Okay, so
This could be in response to arts yesterday.
yes,
Place the responsibility. We're missing out more. Right, and we can.
yeah.
That's
So-
what I felt like.
I
too.
think we.
So maybe we just put it right back in our lap.
Are you comfortable to? I'm guessing she doesn't know, but are you comfortable if we say we direct staff to review the internal control policy surrounding grant applications to consider the ability to apply for grants, but the acceptance to come to the board, or when it's over that amount, whatever the amount is, without even policy. I think it's 100,000. That's very verbose, Canyon, I'm sorry. But that's specifically what we're asking them to look at, is to have more flexibility with application, but not with acceptance.
Staff reviewing the policies and the process.
But we just asked our staff to review any internal policies, rules, or other documents for the grant application process, and to request anything under the board's purview to come back to this committee as an agenda. I just think we're getting into like semantics, but we need an agenda item if we're gonna review
Because
anything.
actually, even though it's an internal control policy, if we have to approve over 100,000, who has to say in that? Do we need it? We are tied somewhere.
I think if they just review all the pieces of it and bring back anything under the board's purview for this committee, then I think we've covered all of our bases.
Deborah,
So grant applications and acceptances come through the consent calendar. And that's where it needs to be either approved or by the, and so that's all internal control. That's all an internal policy that drives that. There's other statutes as far as federal grants are concerned. There's a whole process that we have to go through with the legislature or EAC depending on the amounts. But that's all after the board approves. So it would end up on the consent.
Chair, I wonder if this would, yeah, I know we're dipping into party time.
yes, we are. We're 2 minutes in.
Oh, well, gosh, I have a recommendation here about this. I recommend that staff establish an agenda item on grants management for the January Finance Committee to review processes and procedures for application and for acceptance of grants.
I think
That came from our friend Scott Jones.
that we just need to, I just think we need to add something that says when the agency applies for a federal grant, because we don't want to get into the whole grant management system. So if we just add something about, grant applications, does it say grant applications in there?
And you probably have the same message, but that was,
Oh, I probably had it in
my thought aligns with Scott's is we request an information item on this process because I can almost hear Scott trying to explain it because he is familiar with this.
We want an information item, but we also want a change so that they can apply.
Agreed, but we don't know what to change yet. That's why
He says I can show just the federal, no problem. So let's. Okay, so. How about if we say this? The committee directs staff to review the internal control policy surrounding the grant application process and brings an action item to the committee for any parts that require board involvement. Is that okay with you? And I think they can listen to this conversation and say we are interested in having the ability to apply, but having the board approve acceptance. So we don't miss any important grants that when we're not leaving money on the table of ones that don't have crazy strings attached. Does that work, Member Kelly?
Yeah, you want me to read it again?
Sure, Vice Chair Kelly, yes, thank you.
I move the committee direct staff to review the internal control policy surrounding the grant application process and bring an action item to the committee for any parts that require board involvement.
That's helpful, and I think that will give us an information update and an opportunity if we need to do something with our involvement, even though we have to remember that this really is not our duty, it's theirs. But it's good to have the conversation.
So it felt like we got one yesterday, right? You know,
Yeah, and she may not know.
Yeah, well.
This might just bring some clarity. Thank you. And on that note, happy holidays, everyone. And we did not vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes unanimously, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.